Hi, today we're joined by Chad Tatro. Chad is Zscaler's public sector CTO for AI strategy and governance. Before joining Zscaler, Chad spent 20 years at DHS, with his last role being Deputy CTO and Deputy Chief AI Official. So we're lucky to have Chad join us today to talk a little bit about AI and how it's impacting government agencies. So we'll start there. How are AI technologies making government agencies more efficient?
You know, Last year was really all about the chatbot, and you see those chatbots really everywhere. And when I think about chatbots, I think about what our actual workforce is doing with them, right? And I look at that and I see, for instance, there's a really strong focus on administrative and administrivia. When, for example, I've seen policies, US policy, where a great example would be the definition of a felony, for instance, that the policy around defining the definition of a felony is in multiple documents. So imagine giving your workforce the ability to attach and append five or six policies that are clearly defining the definition of that term, and then correlating it to see if there are gaps or issues or challenges. And, believe it or not, that's a really big issue when you have policy that goes back for many, many, many years. And you're looking at ways to improve policy, for instance, and make modifications to policy. It would take humans many, many hours to do that. But by leveraging these chatbots and these new workflows, being supported by AI, those types of tasks are moving significantly faster. The other area that I definitely saw and I continue to hear is in the area of acquisition and contracting. For those that have to, for me, inside government and now outside, who have to deal with acquisitions and contracts, those are really long documents. There's a lot of sections that are standardized. They're almost boilerplate, but then there are really specific sections that both the government and contractors really need to take a look at and evaluate. And that's such a great space for the use of AI, because it's going to make those government officials and workers more efficient. And it's also going to help us, industry, support the government. So those are two really strong areas that I've seen. I'm also starting to see an increase from a cyber defense perspective, and I'm looking forward to talking about that more.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, there's been so many new initiatives that have come out over the past months and past year or so, to include GenAI.mil and how that's really changing the technology landscape. So for agencies like Department of War, for instance, how are those really being impacted there?
That's one of the ones that I think is I'm certainly most excited about, because so what they've done in the Department of War is they've in essence democratized access to AI, not just models, right? Because GenAI.mil is great in that the way they've structured it is they're going to release models for specific purposes, and they're going to put that in the hands of warfighters and mission operators. I think that that is a phenomenal approach for two really strong reasons. One, it gives all of those in the military, across the military, a single interface where you can kind of build upon your knowledge and your capabilities. Like, imagine you are a logistics expert and you maybe you didn't have a chance to study systems thinking, but now you can leverage this capability to look at systems thinking and how you can align that to your daily job, coordinating logistics around the world. And what GenAI.mil has offered is an opportunity to take that and then build upon it, which I think is incredibly innovative.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, there's a lot of new opportunities that are presented by AI, but there's also challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen, and how are Zscaler kind of approaching those?
The first challenge that stands out for me everywhere, doesn't matter what industry I talk in or people I speak to, it's training the workforce. AI is very different, and we might get into this later, but I don't want people to have to be prompt engineers, but we do want our workforces trained on how to effectively use these tools. I find that that training gap is everywhere. It's prevalent, and so it's like, how do you address that? So Zscaler, for instance, is actively looking at releasing training for our community, both internally and externally. And I think that that is the first one that stands out for me. And then, if I really kind of look, deep within inside the technology, because it's so new, making this technology visible is something that I think a lot about. Zscaler is actively doing that. We are looking at the AI lifecycle. So literally from how your application or service is using a model all the way down to maybe what tools the model is accessing, and building that out in what we're referring to, and OWASP and others are referring to, is the AI bill of materials. And I think that's going to be an exciting area this year coming up to really make AI visible.
So, Chad, how is that being addressed, and how are AI leaders making AI more explainable?
So here at Zscaler, we've been thinking a lot about that, and we've made some strategic acquisitions to specifically address that. And I think 2026, you will start to see a real focus on the equivalent of what would be an AI bill of materials. And so when I'm building this AI capability within my department or agency, I want to be able to see as much as I can of this AI system. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make that very visible, not just from the model perspective, where I've now built an application that integrates with a model, but that model is probably going to be using tools that can draft emails, tools that can do research. Maybe they even have the capability to leverage, open source intelligence products. And what's great about how we're thinking about that is we want to make that completely transparent end to end. And then we want you to have the ability to test and evaluate that very explainable workflow. I think that that is one of the ways in which we can further expand our continuous monitoring and really start to limit what would be defined as those blind spots, because the models themselves are fundamentally a black box. But if we can see everything that's going in and all of the outputs, I think it really leads to this great view of how we can build out the AI bill of materials concept.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge part of it. Obviously, data also, with the government, extremely important in security. So, how is Zscaler really working in that space to making sure that all that data is secure, in fact?
I mean, Zscaler's basis has always been, we are pure zero trust, and when we take that approach, to us, that means protecting from beginning to end. I use this analogy of, it's like, when Zscaler comes in and you're a Zscaler partner and customer, our goal is to put an invisible cloak around not just your workforce, but your workloads, your cloud environments. We really want to be that switchboard that both protects and isolates you. And then, the beauty of what Zscaler has built, and I'm very proud of this coming here and watching all of this, is that we see from a data fabric perspective, with over 500 billion transactions a day, we have a lot of data. We actually get to see and think about how we protect from all the way left to all the way right. And that's the type of thing that just kind of gets me excited about, the direction and momentum that Zscaler is going on the AI front.
Okay, excellent. Well, Chad, thanks so much for joining us today and talking a little bit more about the impact of AI is having on government agencies. Join us next month for another federal AI interview with Zscaler.